Yeah, making pivots. It's tricky, because it's a really circumstantial thing. Yeah, there's been so many times in LD1 and LD2 when I have a problem and Prof would just say, I think you could be more creative about this solution. And it's like the most unhelpful thing you could ever hear, because it's just like, yeah, I know I could be more creative, but this is where I've got right now. When it comes to making pivots, the best thing I could probably say is I think communication is where your key is going to come in. If you're making a pivot, collaborate. Talk to your stakeholder, talk to your peers. I have made some of the best pivots in my career here just sitting on Discord with a group and saying, yeah, so this is kind of what I'm looking at with like my map, and I was thinking of doing maybe like this, and I don't know if that would work, and then just hashing it out. Like, just like I was drowning for special development LD because I got really late on it, and just talking to Sean and some other people I trusted, and when it came to LD, like, it just turned it around right away. Collaborate. Your peers are there to help you.
Making pivots. Making pivots is painful. Making pivots is scary, but it's necessary. I definitely remember about 10 o'clock at night, the day before Portal 2 was due, Profo emailed me and said, your level's not really a level, and you need to change everything. So I was like, oh boy, what do I do? And sometimes it can just be a shot in the dark. It's like, I'm just going to change all my mechanics and try something else completely different. And sometimes it's more of an inspired pivot. It's like they see what you're doing, but you're like on the highway and you're in the wrong lane, and you just need to move over. And doing that, when you finally make that decision, all right, the pivot is happening, that's when you really need to communicate with your stakeholders. Hey, I'm pivoting, I'm going to lose work, my quality will suffer, but I think this is for the best. If you tell them that, they'll probably agree, especially if the pivot is based off of their feedback. So when you pivot, and you will, because nothing ever goes the way it's planned, be sure to tell your stakeholders, keep calm, and try to keep the best core of your idea in your pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. Making pivots and everything is always difficult. And just a couple things on it. One, as I've said before, it's a lot easier to make pivots early, especially before you've started building things in Editor. So again, it's very important to get your size, your scale, your scope, and your design as good as you can while you're still in the documentation and the planning phase before you actually start building in the editor. Because it's really easy to pivot when you're still just talking about it and writing it down than when you've built the entire thing in editor and you have to, tear that whole thing up and do it again. But sometimes that will happen. Sometimes you have built it and you've realized, oh, this is not going well, or maybe Profo tells you that. It's important to not be super attached to every single thing in your level. Find the things that you really are passionate about. Like, I want this to be in the level. I want this to be what the level is about. Make sure those stay in, but everything else is negotiable. Be able to say, okay, that's fine. I'm going to change because this is a creative process and this is designed to be seen by more than just you. So you have to take your ego down a bit and be able to realize that maybe I didn't design the best thing the first try, and be able to say, okay, round 2, I'm going to make it better the next time. And again, developing the skill of taking feedback and being able to know exactly what to change, it all comes with practice. But again, it's important to not take things personally and be able to find the things you want to keep and move everything around those.
I would say making pivots is universally the same, but also like case by case. Like every pivot you make, regardless of what thing you're working on, is always going to be this like one specific part that you've never run into this problem before, or you just didn't think about this problem coming up and you now have to make a pivot. But also every pivot is going to be the same in that something isn't working and you have to come up with a new solution for it. What I find is that making pivots is scary, but also like the most rewarding part of the job. Like if you can pivot and it's really good, then it feels like awesome. Like you have a real direct hand in exactly what made the level good. And, you know, some pivots aren't good. You're going to make mistakes, but, you know, that's just a part of it. Like, that's how it goes.
So making pivots is tough at times. You know, when the professors say there's this one part of your level that's like a central part of your level, but it's not working, it's not fun, or whatever's part of it is broken. So you need to make a pivot. It's always like, oh, man, that's what I had in my LVD, that's what I was planning for. But you got to be able to tackle that with enthusiasm and be like, okay, if I were to continue on this path with this, my level at the end wouldn't be that good. So a big part of that is communicating with stakeholders and your professors and figuring out what's it going to take to switch this to make it more fun. It's different case by case, but for the most part, as long as you're communicating and you're creatively thinking solutions to problems, it'll be okay. And everybody has to make pivots. Don't think that when a professor tells you you need to make a big pivot that, oh, I'm going to be so behind, my level's not going to be any good. Everybody has to make pivots at some point. It happens, and it's a great learning opportunity too.